The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered fence posts as Frank Henderson adjusted his worn cowboy hat and squinted toward the horizon. He had been working this land for 37 years now, and every groove in the wooden rails told a story of seasons past and cattle driven and quiet mornings when the world felt like it belonged to him. Alone today, something was different though. A figure sat hunched against his old water trough near the main corral, and as Frank drew closer he could see it was a young woman, maybe 25 or so, with auburn hair tucked beneath a faded headscarf. Her dress was simple and modest, but torn in places, and there were dark bruises visible on her arms and legs. She held her head in, her hands as if the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. Frank had seen enough trouble in his years to recognize someone running from something. He approached slowly, the way he might approach a wounded animal, and when she looked up, he saw eyes that held both fear and exhaustion in equal measure. "Ma'am," he said, gently removing his hat. "I'm Frank Henderson, and this is my ranch. You hurt?" The woman pulled the headscarf lower over her face and shook her head quickly. "I'm sorry, mister," she said. "I didn't mean to trespass. I was just resting for a moment, and I'll be on my way." Her voice carried the soft drawl of someone raised in these parts, but there was something fragile about the way she spoke, as if words themselves might break. Frank noticed how she kept one hand pressed against the side of her face beneath the scarf. "Now hold on there," Frank said, settling down on his haunches a respectful distance away. "Nobody's asking you to leave. Matter of fact, it looks like you could use some help." The woman's eyes darted toward the road, then back to Frank. "I appreciate the kindness, sir, but I can't stay anywhere long. People are looking for me, and I don't want to bring trouble to good folks." Frank studied her face, what he could see of it anyway. In his 63 years, he had learned to read people the way he read the sky before a storm. This woman wasn't running from the law. She was running from someone who had hurt her badly and might do it again. "Well," Frank said, slowly, "seems to me a person has a right to rest on a hot day, and it just so happens I could use some help around here. My housekeeper Mary retired last month, and the place has been falling apart without her. You know anything about cooking or cleaning?" The woman's hand trembled slightly as she adjusted the scarf. "I can cook some," she said quietly, "and I'm good with cleaning and mending. But mister, I told you I can't stay. It wouldn't be safe." Frank stood up and brushed the dust from his knees. "Names, not mister," he said with a gentle smile. "It's Frank, and what should I call you?" For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she said Sarah Collins. Something in the way she said it told Frank it might not be her real name, but he didn't press names. Were just words anyway. What mattered was the person behind them. "Well, Sarah Collins," Frank said. "How about we start with some lemonade and see how things go from there? No commitments, no questions asked, just two people sharing a drink on a hot afternoon." Sarah looked toward the road again, then back at Frank. Something in his weathered face and patient manner seemed to ease her fear just a little. "I suppose that would be all right," she said. Frank's house was a modest ranch-style home built with his own hands, 40 years earlier. The kitchen was spacious with windows that looked out over the pastures, and Sarah found herself relaxing. Despite her fears, Frank moved around the kitchen with the easy confidence of a man who had been taking care of himself for years. As he prepared the lemonade, Sarah noticed photographs on the windowsill. A pretty woman with dark hair and Frank's same kind eyes. A young boy on a horse grinning at the camera. Frank followed her gaze. "That's my wife Ellen," he said quietly. "She passed 5 years ago. Cancer, and that's our boy David when he was about 12. He's grown now with a family of his own back in Oklahoma." "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "About your wife, I mean." Frank nodded as he handed her a tall glass of lemonade. "She was the best woman I ever knew," he said. "Had a way of making everyone feel welcome. Used to say this house was too big for just two people, so she was always inviting folks to stay for dinner or put up travelers who needed a place to rest." Sarah sipped the lemonade and found it was perfect. Not too sweet, not too tart. "She sounds wonderful," Sarah said. "She was," Frank agreed. "And she always said kindness was the most important thing a person could offer. Said it didn't cost anything, but it was worth more than gold." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Frank could see Sarah was struggling with something, and he had learned over the years that sometimes the best thing you could do was just wait. Finally, Sarah set down her glass and looked at Frank with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "I need to tell you something. The people looking for me, they're not good people. My husband, her voice broke. He hurt me real bad, and when I tried to leave, he said he'd kill me before he'd let me go. So I had to run in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on my back." Frank felt a familiar anger rise in his chest. The same anger he'd felt years ago when he'd found his neighbor beating his dog. The same anger that made him want to do something about men who hurt things smaller and weaker than themselves, but he kept his voice calm. "I'm sorry that happened to you, Sarah," he said. "No woman should have to live in fear like that." Sarah pulled the headscarf tighter around her face. "The thing is," she said, "he didn't just hurt me with his fists, She paused, struggling with the words. "He hurt my face real bad, made me ugly. That's why I keep this scarf on. I don't want to frighten people." Frank set down his own glass and looked directly at Sarah. "Sarah," he said gently, "I've lived on this earth for 63 years and I've learned that ugly comes from inside a person. It comes from cruelty and meanness and the desire to hurt others. What's on the outside, that's just skin and bone. It's what's in here." He tapped his chest. "That makes a person beautiful or ugly." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand," she said. "It's really bad people stare or look away, or worse, they look at me with pity. I can't bear that." Frank reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Sarah," he said, "whatever your husband did to you, it doesn't change who you are inside. And if you'll let me, I'd like to show you something." He stood up and walked to a drawer near the sink. From it, he pulled out a photograph. It was old and worn at the edges. "This is my brother Tommy," Frank said, returning to the table. "He was born with what the doctors called a cleft palate. Back then in the 1940s, they couldn't fix things like they can now. Tommy looked different, and some people were cruel about it. But you know what? He was the kindest, most generous person I ever knew. Always helping others. Always finding ways to make people laugh. He had more friends than anyone in town because people saw past the outside to the good man he was inside." Sarah studied the photograph. Tommy had been severely disfigured, but his eyes held the same warmth she saw in Frank's. "What happened to him?" she asked. "He lived a full life," Frank said. "Married a wonderful woman who saw him for who he really was. Had 3 children who adored their daddy. Owned a small store in town where everyone loved to shop because Tommy always had time to listen to their problems and offer advice. He died 10 years ago, at age 72, surrounded by more friends and family than you could fit in a church." Frank put the photograph away and sat back down. "My point is, Sarah, that beauty isn't about perfect features or smooth skin. It's about the light that shines from inside a person, and I can see that light in you even if you can't see it yourself right now." Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please don't take them off," she said, clutching at her headscarf. "Please don't make me show you." Frank's voice was infinitely gentle. "I would never make you do anything, Sarah. But I want you to know that whatever you're hiding under there, it won't change how I see you. You're a brave woman who had the courage to leave a dangerous situation. You're someone who says please and thank you and worries about bringing trouble to others. That's the person I see, and that's the person who's welcome to stay here as long as she needs to." Sarah sat quietly for a long time. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "If I show you," she said, "and you can't hide the shock or the pity, will you promise to just let me leave quietly? No questions, no trying to make me feel better about it." Frank nodded solemnly. "I promise," he said. Slowly, carefully, Sarah began to unwrap the headscarf. Her hands trembled as she pulled it away, revealing auburn hair that was thick and beautiful. Then she lifted her head and Frank saw her face. The left side was perfect. High cheekbone, smooth skin, eyes the color of morning coffee. But the right side told a story of violence and healing. Scars ran from her temple to her jaw, her right eye was slightly lower than her left, and her mouth curved differently. On that side, it was clear that someone had hurt her badly, and that healing had been a long, difficult process. Frank looked at her steadily, taking in her face without flinching or looking away. After a moment, he smiled. "You have beautiful eyes, Sarah," he said, "and I can see why your husband was so desperate to keep you. Not because of how you look, but because of who you are. A man would be lucky to have someone as brave and good as you in his life." Sarah stared at him, searching his face for any sign of disgust or pity. Instead, she saw only kindness and acceptance. "You're not horrified?" she asked in a small voice. "I'm horrified that someone hurt you," Frank said. "But horrified by you never your